Welcome, ladies, this morning. It's great to see you all. It's great to see everyone on camera too, so thank you for that. I know you're doing a session first thing, and not everyone always wants to come on camera, but it's always nice to see your face, and it just helps with interaction and us getting to know you more. So thank you for that, and thank you for joining and signing up for this. I can see a lot of familiar faces, but also a lot of new faces. So thank you if you've been here before or if it's your first session as well. So today it's going to be all around discovering the future of work, which is I'm sure why you signed up because you saw the two great speakers that we've got, but also you're curious to how the future of work is going to look and getting some tips and hints, but also discussing ideas as a group as well. So a little bit about me. So I used to work at Crimson. I used to work in the CIO recruitment team, but then I also did partner management there. And a lot of my role was very much events focused workshops, and I was very big on providing value, but also setting up workshops that were going to be useful for networking to let other people in meet each other, but equally that we could give you some value as well, because it's really important that we aren't just kind of a service that provider, but also that we can give you value and connect you to other people. So one of the things that I did was set up some workshops. So one of them was a CIO candidate workshop, and then often in those workshops would get maybe 1 out of 12 maximum that was a woman. And then that one woman would always say to me, "Oh, it's a shame that there's not more women here." And I would say, "Yeah, I know." And they would say, "Is there anything that you can do to connect me to other women?" So that's why I set up the Women in Tech Forum like 2 years ago now, just over 2 years ago. So it's gone quick. We did start them as in-person events, wine tasting evenings. So sorry that it's not that right now, but I'm sure we can go back to some of that in the future. So that's the main reason of it, to let you all meet each other, but also to come with thought-provoking topics that we can discuss. So it is an interactive session that we do want you to get involved with, because it's all about learning from each other, meeting other people, but also we're getting some great speakers, as you'll be able to see this morning as well. So just to recap what I said, so insightful speakers, open discussions, so no judgment here. That's really important. That's really something that is important for me, but for everyone else as well. I don't want it to feel like any question is a silly question. We're all in it together. Share your ideas and approaches. So if you've got any new ideas, if you've got anything that you want to discuss or anything that's working well for you, share it. Let's discuss it. Find solutions. So we want to find solutions to your problems, whether it's down to productivity, mental health, LinkedIn, the future of work, as we're here today to discuss. We want to help you find solutions, but most importantly, to have fun and meet others. It can be a lonely place sometimes, so it's really important to have a network of other people that you can rely on, ask questions to, but also know that you've got a community to come to. So, as I said, it is an interactive session, and I don't just want us to talk at you. So what I'd like you to do in the chat window, and I will be having a look through and bring in some of you to have a quick chat with me, if you don't mind. So introduce yourself. So who are you and what do you do? If you're working, let us know where you're working. What have you enjoyed the most and least about working from home? So um, mine's probably been being with my dog, being able to be comfortable, but then also miss the interaction of humans. And I think sometimes you can forget actually how to interact with humans in person. Then I know that happened to me. Have you been more productive working from home, or do you find yourself getting distracted? Again, let us know in the chat. And how would you like to work in the future? So do introduce yourself in the chat window. And Lou, while everyone's introducing themselves, maybe you can introduce and let people know a bit about how you are as well.
I was just typing it, but that's perfect. I like to talk. Hi, Keish. Thank you ever so much, everyone. Yes, Keisha has been part of our business and will continue to be so as a colleague and as an ally for years to come, I'm sure, and she's fantastic. So I head up the recruitment business at Crimson. We have a team delivering contract perm and CIO executive search services. I've been in recruitment for 18-20 years now, I think. Started off in London recruiting for investment banks and worked my way all the way through. But I love working with people. I love enjoy managing and running and helping develop new consultants. But we've really got to a great place. And Crimson, as you may know, have a solutions business as well, which makes it just a lot more interesting as a recruitment team to be able to talk with IT directors, CIOs, CEOs about their solutions across the piece, and with recruitment just being a part of that. In terms of working from home, I have my great days and I have days where I just think, oh my goodness, get me out of here. And similarly, I like to go and take my dog a walk over the fields and get some fresh air. I have struggled, if I'm honest, from day to day, mainly because of needing to be with a lot of people. And I get a lot of my own personal satisfaction from seeing, you know, others do well and the enjoyment of that. And it is difficult to get that connection sometimes over a Teams call. We've also hired some new people to join the team over the last couple of years, which I'm delighted to say. And again, that training and development piece for me has been really instrumental. And we've made sure that we can get as much collaboration in the office when we've been able to, and we're looking to do that more and more going forward. But getting that balance right, especially with being a working mum, is always equally important as well. I've been getting the kids off to school this morning, breakfast fed to get online for 8:30. So I'm sure we've all been there. But it's nice to meet you all, ladies. Thank you.
Thank you, Lou. Is everyone having any difficulties with putting things in the chat? Oh, perfect. It's coming through now for me. That's cool. Hi, Julie. Welcome. Hi, Kerry. Hi, Teresa. Hi, Sarah. I'm starting to see them now. I wasn't seeing anything for a little while. Julie, are you okay to come up mute maybe and just introduce yourself? I'll pick on a few of you, so sorry if I do pick you.
All right, thanks ever so much. Yeah, this is me in my retirement, but I'm pretty passionate about women in tech at the moment, so it's quite important for me. You know, I am ex-BT. Nicola, you may remember me as Julie Ragborn, which is what I was when we were back then, responsible for BT Open. The Wi-Fi. Anyway, bringing me up to date, I'm, you know, chairing Scotland's 5G Centre, which is the Scottish funded, you know, organisation to try and, you know, get connectivity across Scotland. 98% of it is classified as rural, so it doesn't tend to fit the usual business model. So some interesting challenges there. And more than anything else for me, the challenge has been that I retired just as we went into the first lockdown. So I have been recruited into both my two core non-exec roles remotely. I've only managed one trip to Scotland and I've had to learn to do everything remotely from my home office in the basement. So yes, it's had a knock-on effect on my mental health. I won't make any bones about it, you know, exercise and so on, but I can find it pretty lonely sometimes. And you know, I've actually got a real reason to go in for a meeting into London on Monday, and I've just tried my suit on. Bloody fit. So looking forward to that more than anything else. So now planning a shopping trip on Saturday to go and buy a suit.
Oh no! What did you say? Did you say it doesn't fit now?
No.
I think we've all probably been through that. And
Yeah.
also remembering how to dress to go back out to these meetings, it's like, oh.
Yeah, I'm going to have to put heels on again. Heavens above, I'm used to living in nice, comfy slippers.
Yeah, same here. It's exciting though, isn't it? Because then you look forward to the interaction and actually it doesn't just become another day. You're actually looking forward to going and seeing people and being around people. And thanks for touching on the mental health aspect as well, because I'm sure a lot of people can relate here, a lot of you ladies, that you can have good and bad days and actually feeling quite alone in your role, or just being, you know, by yourself. It's just having that support around you is important as well. Well, thank you for sharing. Teresa, are you okay to come off mute? And we'll do one more and then we'll move into the speakers, so don't worry. Oh, I'm not going to pick on everyone, but thank you for introducing yourself, and do connect on LinkedIn after this.
Morning everybody.
Hello.
As you can see, we are back in the office. So I work for Severn Trent Water, have done for 15 years on and off, shall we say. I'm currently one of the practice leads here that looks after the people practices for all of the tech resources. So really enjoyed working from home. I think it gave a really good work-life balance, and I'm sure we can all relate to the fact that we all have household chores to do, and it's nice to just do some of those when you don't have to commute. So getting that work-life balance for me really worked, loved it. I do also think much more productive at home, and that's because there was less social distraction. So one of the advantages of being in the office is that social interaction, but equally, you know, it does distract you from doing some work sometimes, so you then have to stay later to get that work done.
Yeah.
So that's the disadvantage. It's getting the right balance, I think. For me, I'd probably enjoy would enjoy a hybrid. So I'd probably like to be in the office 3 days a week, 2 days at home.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's just my own personal preference.
So are you in the office now 5 days a week?
Yep, straight back in. It's
Oh,
killed me
wow,
this week.
okay.
It's our first week back and it's killed me.
I was going to say it, but you'll be like so tired on the weekend, just needing to get over the week
For
of
sure.
being.
I've
Yeah,
missed my lion. Yeah, for sure.
yeah.
Yeah.
No, and also it's not just the line; it's actually like getting out, isn't it? And like we said, putting your suit on or getting ready to.
Exactly. Yeah, getting ready for work is very different to just rocking up at home when you're not on video camera, for example. It is very
Yeah.
different. Yeah.
No, well, thank you for sharing,
Agreed.
and I hope it goes well being back in 5
I'm
days
looking
a
forward
week.
to the weekend.
I was going to say, no, thank you for that.
It's all right.
Great. So we will do have one more. Claire Davison, did you want to introduce yourself?
Oh, I probably bored everyone enough last time.
Some
It's
new
just the
people
same
here
for
that
me.
won't remember or that wouldn't have met you yet.
So for the last 2.5 years, I've been running my sort of consultancy from home, and it's not changed. We're still trying to find that perfect balance, which probably won't get. Love having time with my dog. Still miss wearing shoes, any shoes. That's the bit that I really miss. Although I am going to Bristol in a couple of weeks to do a kickoff. So I'm really looking forward to that. Just nice way to start building a relationship before we do the big project. But yeah, still happy, still smiling, everything's going great, but very much on the lines of well-being, look after yourself. And Cooper, the dog, is still my HR manager, well-being partner. He is still making me get up and go out, so everything's good.
Oh no, that's good. And yeah, but like we just said, it's nice to when you look forward to actually going to meetings or going to see people. So it doesn't just become another day of like, oh, I've got to go out. It's actually like we're looking forward to
Yeah.
it now. We're actually like planning ahead what we're going to wear. So that's a nice part about it, I think.
I'm
so
still
welcome
thinking
everyone
about
else.
shoes. So.
Yeah, shoes. Thank you. So we've got Claire, we've got Joe, welcome, Hannah, Laura. Hi, Laura. We said hello to you, Ellen, your lovely dog. Teresa, Luke. So great. Thank you everyone for commenting. I can see you all. So do continue to comment. Put your LinkedIn in there as well. And after the session, do go and connect with each other because it is important to have a network. Hi, Chloe. Welcome. Nice to see you. Perfect. So thank you everyone for introducing yourself. And throughout the sessions, if you have got any questions, do put them in the chat and I'll monitor it or raise your hand because we want, if you've got anything that you want to ask the speakers, do, and we'll get to you as soon as we can. Great, so that brings me nicely on to today's speakers. So you probably saw it on when you signed up, but we have got two amazing speakers lined up for you. So the first one is Kerry. So she's the founder and CEO of Rubitech. So Kerry is an award-winning entrepreneur management company. And also she's now at the forefront of tech solutions for apprentices in every sector. So her session is going to be all around the benefits of apprentices. So some of your companies will already be using apprenticeships or be thinking about it and be thinking about how you can benefit from them, especially when there's a skill shortage. So Kerry's session will be all about that. And then we've also got Dr. Nicola Millard. So she's a principal innovation partner at BT. I'm sure a lot of you have heard of her or seen her speak or seen some of her clips and things. I've personally heard Nicola speak and she's amazing. So really excited for her session as well. Nicola's going to be talking all around from automation to Zedonks, the forces shaping the future of work. Nicola is also a TEDx speaker and she's also hosted several conference panels, spoke, and she's told us that some of her days she's literally got 3 speaking slots. So she is very maxed out with speaking. So really looking forward to her session as well. Perfect. So that will lead me on to you, Carrie. So if you'd like to share your screen and I'll stop sharing.
Okay, can you see my slides?
Yeah, got them.
Okay, thanks ever so much for that lovely introduction, Keisha. There's been a lot of talk about dogs this morning. I just feel I need to give a shout out to my dog Ruby because the business is named after her.
Oh, lovely.
I know, and she was sat looking at me one day when I was trying to come up with a name for the business in that way that dogs do, with her head cocked to one side. And I said to her, what are we going to call this business, Ruby? And then it struck me. So yeah, big shout out to Ruby the dog and all of the dogs, cats and fluffy animals that keep us sane through the day. So it's great to be here this morning and talk about my experience of attracting, recruiting and retaining apprentices. And when I talk about retaining apprentices, I really mean managing them in such a way that they don't disengage and then leave their apprenticeship early. I've had a lot of experience of this, both as an employer, but also in my business, which is now all about improving apprenticeship completion rates. And I'm going to share with you some information about how and why we feel it's important to improve those completion rates. But before we move on, could I just have a show of hands or a comment in the chat window from all of you whose businesses currently employ apprentices? Yeah, so I can see some hands. I'm not sure if there's anything going on in the chat, but yes, I can see that there are lots of you who employ apprentices or are apprentices, or you mentor some. So there's some really good experience here today, I think. It may or may not surprise you to know that 40% of apprentices won't achieve qualification. So for every 10 apprentices, 4 will fail. And that's a national average. Your business may be better at it than the national average, but nationally, that's the completion rate for apprentices. It's also the same number of people who right at this minute want to change employment. So it's quite interesting, this whole topic that we're going to have a talk about, because I think there are some things that you can apply to not just staff, but also apprentices as well. So just to get some thoughts flowing, we were going to try and jump to a whiteboard, but for some reason I can't get that working at my end this morning. So what I'd like to ask you to do is just pop into the chat some of the reasons why you think an apprentice might disengage from their apprenticeship and therefore not complete. So why they might leave their apprenticeship early. If you could just pop your answers into the chat for me, that would be great. We got any coming through? Lack of support, they get bored with not enough to do. Being used as a dog's body, definitely. Not really what they want to do. Yes, they get poached once trained up. Change of career if they're not fully informed of the role. So yes, that's all about job matching in the first place. Not being part of the bigger picture, that's a really significant one in our experience. Not anticipated the time and effort into the study required, and possibly also not being given the time within the working day to do that study as well. Okay, so I think we can all agree that there are lots of reasons why apprentices might disengage and not complete. Definitely more money. I used to employ construction apprentices, and scaffolding apprentices would leave for an extra 5 pence an hour. They'd go from one employer to another employer for an extra 5 pence, very fickle. But yes, some interesting reasons here. What I'd like you to do now is to think about the financial impact of non-completion. So we understand the reasons. We know that 40% of apprentices don't achieve qualification, but what do you think the financial impact is of that loss of an apprentice early? Hannah, could you pull up the poll for me, please? And I'd like you all to have a guess at what you think the financial impact is per apprentice on the employer. Okay, so some quite interesting results. Up to £30,000 seems to be the front runner at the moment. I'm gonna take it as that's all of the responses. It's actually in the region of between 35 and 50,000 pounds. It's a significant amount of money, and a few things determine that figure. So it's dependent on the value of the training, and that could be up to £27,000. But there's also an impact on mentoring and supervision that you have to put in place to support apprentices. We consider the cost of recruitment. We consider the loss of skills that the business never realises because they've lost the apprentice early. But perhaps the most significant impact is the impact on the learner themselves, because they are likely to suffer a lifetime earnings impact, which means they'll never realise the additional earnings that they could have achieved had they completed. And one of the other things that we find is apprentices that don't complete have a tendency to go on to not complete other things that they then start. So it starts to repeat a pattern. Now, it's one thing to look at a bunch of faceless shapes on a presentation, but when you actually picture your team and then you think about what losing 40% would look like, it's no wonder that this current trend is being called the Great Resignation. I don't know if you've heard that term, but there is a term out in the marketplace at the moment, and we're calling it the Great Resignation. But I love a challenge, and my personal motto is there's always a solution. You know, most of us here, I think, deal in tech. We're about using technology for good. And for me, there's always a solution, and that's what RubyTech's been founded on. So I think we should call this opportunity the Great Retention, because there's an opportunity here for us to do things a little bit differently and think about how we can prevent disengagement so that we don't suffer those losses, and so that apprentices don't suffer the impact of those losses as well. I'd like to ask you, has anyone carried out cause and effect analysis before? Some nods and some shaking of the head. So as a business, we saw an opportunity to help training providers and employers improve their completion rates for apprentices. And I think this applies whether you're looking at losing staff in general who are employees and not necessarily just apprentices, or whether you're focusing on your apprenticeships. So we started to apply cause and effect analysis on our software and developed a bunch of algorithms that would identify potential triggers for disengagement. So we were looking at identifying disengagement before it happens, because we realised that through data, it will often spot things that a human being doesn't or can't, and we can then do something about that. So we saw apprentice retention rates go up by an additional 25% when we applied the effect of these algorithms. So by analysing all of the reasons why apprentices disengage and then grouping them into these sort of headings. So what we've got here is a fishbone diagram, and it's often used to analyse cause and effect. And so if we think back to those reasons that you put into the chat earlier as to why apprentices might disengage and leave their apprenticeship early, you can probably group all of those reasons into one or more of these categories. And when you apply that grouping, you might find, surprisingly, that you've got a bunch of reasons or a bunch of causes that sit under one topic in particular or one heading in particular. And what we can then do is start to really focus on, okay, so if location is our biggest issue, what can we do to address that so that we prevent disengagement from happening in the first place? Or if management is our biggest issue, how can we better equip the managers of those apprentices so that we're preventing that disengagement? When you're looking at staff retention, whether that's staff overall or apprentices specifically, looking at all of the reasons why can really help you to start to understand why apprentices disengage and what you can do as an organisation to prevent it from happening in the first place. And we found that the information actually surprised us. So Oftentimes apprentices will get called into reviews, they'll be told they're underperforming, they're not submitting their work at college, or they're not doing the things that they should be doing in the workplace. And quite often there could just be a lack of communication between the different stakeholders, so the learner themselves, the training provider or the college, and the employer. Sometimes you end up with situations where learners are shared amongst different managers within a business, and those managers need a forum for communication as well. So just looking at the different reasons can be quite surprising, but it can also help you to start making some informed decisions. I'm not going to go on very much longer, and I'd like to open up the session then to some questions, but I just want to share with you some facts about apprenticeships you may or may not be aware of. So apprenticeships are not just for young people. They've changed quite significantly over the last few years. They are for any age from 16 onwards. And in fact, the average learner on the Rubitech platform, and our customers are training providers, so this isn't a sales pitch by any stretch of the imagination, but our average learner age is 48 years old. There are around 2,000 providers delivering almost 650 different apprenticeship standards, so there's a huge choice of apprenticeships available. And if training is something that you identify as being a win-win for your organisation and for your employees, I would suggest having a look at the apprenticeships that are available, because there's a huge range of them. Apprenticeships also go up all the way up to level 7, which is the equivalent to a master's degree. There are a bunch of current incentives available to employers, up to around £4,000. Now, some of these are time sensitive and others depend on things like the learner's age, but I'm happy to chat with anyone who'd like to find out more about these. I think my final piece of advice, if you're thinking about recruiting or currently employ apprentices, is this. Invest wisely in apprenticeships. Make sure all of the people who are supporting apprentices are equipped to do so. And when I'm talking about that, I'm meaning your internal people. Find a training provider or a college who will really support you and your learners and understand your business, because it's really important that they deliver training that's tailored to your needs and the needs of your learners. Getting it wrong can be hugely costly, as we've already seen. And finally, understand the reasons why your apprentices leave early so that you can start to prevent disengagement before it happens. My name is Kerry Linley. Please connect with me on LinkedIn or call, email, or feel free to drop me a message in the chat, and I'll be happy to pick those up. Keisha, do we have time for a few questions if there are any?
Yeah, definitely. We've got 15 minutes if anyone's got any questions.
Fab.
So maybe we can start with those who raise their hand to say that they are using apprentice at the moment. How are you finding it? And we have got a question from Laura. What is your view of government kickstart scheme? Maybe Laura, you could come off mute as well if you want.
Yeah, Kerry, I'm mentoring. Well, actually, I've stopped mentoring because she's not on the scheme anymore. But I've been mentoring somebody on that scheme, and it seems, I don't know whether it's the employers or the kind of government guidelines around it, but it just doesn't seem very well structured. So I wonder what you thought.
It's not very well structured. I think that's my view. I'm not a politician. If you ask me a question, I'll give you a really straight answer.
Yeah.
I think the scheme has had some unintended consequences. I think it's been badly administered, but there are organisations, you know, it's typical government initiative. There are organisations who have stepped up to support the scheme. So just to give you an example, we're working with an organisation at the moment. We've been trying to recruit a Kickstarter since August last year. We finally had a session of interviews yesterday, and that's since August last year. Now,
Goodness me.
Rubitech's in a town that's quite affluent, so the pool of Kickstart applicants is quite small.
Right.
but it definitely speaks to this forum this morning. We started off with a very specific job spec, and there was a hybrid working from home arrangement. We tried to be quite flexible, and we've had to completely change that to appeal to a much wider audience of Kickstart applicants. We had a session of interviews yesterday. We had 4 booked in, 1 turned up. The support from the DWP to get the Kickstart applicants through that process has been quite poor. I've been working with an organisation called Futures for Business, who has sort of picked up the mantle. They've communicated with the applicants, and they've really sort of moved things forward. So we've seen some positives from it, but I think the whole scheme has, you know, if you think about it, it's an extended job placement for 6 months, and the employer has to teach the individual employability skills as part of the scheme. So that's already telling the Kickstarter, we're not going to keep you on because we're going to teach you employability skills on the basis that you are going to move on. So the commitment from that, the Kickstarter themselves isn't there in the first instance. And if you don't teach employability skills as part of the programme, you're not fulfilling your obligations as an employer.
That's really interesting, because that reflects the dynamic I had with my mentee as well. I really wish I'd phoned you, Kerry, to talk about it, because she just wasn't very engaged. And when she lost her placement, I said, look, you know, do you want to still chat? Because I thought it felt like I was deserting her. But she's not even joined any of the sessions that we've set up. So, and I feel really bad, but that explains a little bit about it. It's obviously not a great, she's not had a great experience and just feels abandoned, I suspect, which is really sad.
It is. I've seen some really positive outcomes, but also lots of negative ones. And I think that is to do with the pressure that the DWP puts on young people to apply to these schemes when they don't want to.
Yeah, she definitely was in that space.
Yeah, so they're there because they have to be, not because they want to be in some instances.
Okay, well, that's really interesting. Thank you.
No, thank you for the question. It was a good one.
There's another question, thank you, Laura, from Sarah Green. Hello, Sarah. What is the percentage of leavers and younger ones?
Do you know, I don't know the figures off the top of my head. They are available on the government website. I think the percentage of leavers historically would have been quite high in the younger age groups. But what we are starting to see now is that the percentage of leavers across the board is rising. So up until probably 18 months ago, the retention rate was something like 67%, and it's fallen to 60%. And because you've got lots of older people now doing apprenticeships, or people of all ages, and lots of people changing jobs or realising through the pandemic that I want to change of career, we're starting to see the impact of that across all age groups, and all people doing apprenticeships. So that the retention rate in this country is no different to any other. I mean, if we look at, I think it's Canada, they've got a 50% retention rate. And you've got other countries with much lower retention rates, but equally places like Germany have a much higher record. So, you know, there is some learning we can do from other countries that we don't do here.
Sarah, I don't know if you're able to come off mute. Did you, because I know you wrote in the chat a couple of times around, so your experience. So have you had some apprentices that have got poached once trained as well? Not sure. Sarah, are you still here? If not, we can come back to you. That's fine. Hi, Joe. So I've heard of even lower engagement levels than 1 in 4 attend an interview for Kickstart. I feel that many young people don't know what they want to do and get pigeonholed into what is available. Do we need to invest more into careers advice and support?
Yes, I would say that's a definite. So I'm a STEM ambassador. I'm also a school governor, and I know through the work that I do in those roles that schools don't have dedicated careers information, advice and guidance people anymore. And it's left to the teachers to give that advice. and teachers are not well equipped. They teach, they don't work in industry. There's an organisation called the Careers and Enterprise Company, and they provide careers advisors that work with schools. And if any of you are connected to a school, I would really recommend you looking into this. Those careers advisors can come in and sort of act as the bridge between staff in school and the external world of employers, and arrange events for young people in schools. I've got an 18-year-old son. I've got 5 children actually, of varying ages and different levels of competence and ability. And my son attended a careers event at school, and he came home and he said, "Do you know, Mum, they all these stalls turned up. CITB was there, which is the Construction Industry Training Board, and lots of big businesses. And they turned up with an A4 sheet that talked all about their organisation and what their mission and vision and values were." He said, and as a 16-year-old, it didn't mean a thing to me, but there was one guy there with a stand, and he had a flyer, and the flyer said, "We sell branded products for the sports industry." He said, and he had the most people in the hall at his stand because we all understood what he was telling us. So again, you know, it's about making that careers advice and guidance relevant to the audience, and I think we've kind of lost touch with that.
Yeah, that's a really good answer, because like you said, it's got to be relevant and and relatable. If you're just talking about the company and it sounds like nonsense to the student, they're like, well, why should I join? It's got to be of interest, make it a bit more interesting. Thank you for
Yeah.
that. So, Teresa, you put in the chat as well, so around why apprentices might leave, not anticipated the time and effort into study required, and then they get busy in their job, which impacts study leave. So I'm sure that's quite a popular thing that happens. Did you want to maybe come off mute and just, have you had experience with that?
Yeah, I have. So we've actually had quite a reasonable amount of success with our apprenticeship schemes, and we've toyed with doing different. So we've done generic digital transformation schemes and specific schemes. So we're currently doing a cyber apprenticeship scheme at the moment.
Oh, cool.
I think a lot of it is about the individual, if I'm honest. But I have seen people in busy jobs forgoing their day release to catch up on work, etc., and then it has an impact on study, and then they get so far behind, and I've seen that on only a couple of occasions, but that for me I think is the biggest impact for us losing our apprenticeship colleagues. So we've had some good success with the Kickstarter program as well, there, quite interestingly. So we did sponsor a lot of Kickstarters, some of which did go on to secure permanent roles within our organisation. But I think it comes back to a level of maturity, and like you were saying around the careers fairs, visions, mission statements, etc. That doesn't mean anything to to a school leaver. That they need to be handheld, and some of them really struggle to even transition into a work environment. And that was the bit about the employability skills, is helping them and really working with them to almost set expectations about what it's like and what's expected of you to work for an organisation. And we are a corporate, so it might be a little bit different to a smaller organisation, but yeah. So
Would you
we've done the
say that,
Kickstarters as well as the apprenticeships as well. Sorry, Keisha, go on.
that's really good. And sorry to interrupt. I was going to ask, would you say you guys are quite careful and considerate of making sure that they're not too busy with their job that they can't study? How do you do that? Have you been effective in making sure, even if they've got busy, that that like, no, they can't be working, they need to actually study?
If I'm honest, it very much depends on who they work for and what scheme they're
Okay.
on. So yeah, and again, that's down to the management piece that you talked about, the management support, really buying into the scheme. And I think we've got some advocates for people development who absolutely support the scheme. More, shall I say, red delivery focused people that probably forego some of that study leave and insist on the task being completed.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think it very
depends
much
on the
depends on the
manager.
management structure as well. Yeah.
You see that quite a lot, Kerry?
Yeah, definitely. It's really important that within our software, we've got a learning log, so learners can keep track of their off-the-job hours, and maintaining that 20% is really important. I've got an apprentice myself. We meet every Friday. He gives me a rundown of what he's been doing on his college days. I do think there is a particular issue for apprentices who are given 1 day a week to work on college stuff or apprenticeship stuff. It's much better to spread that out over the course of a week, in my experience. Just touching on a couple of things there, Teresa, that you mentioned. A-level students don't do work experience anymore. So they are held back from doing work experience in their final year of secondary school because they're supposed to be studying hard for their A-levels and they move into sixth form. Those students who are less academically able, or who the teachers believe are less academically able, will be they'll do work experience. School will support them with it, but your A-level students tend to be held back from work experience, so there's a disconnect there for those young people. And also, apprenticeships are not seen as a positive outcome for most secondary schools, and until they are, most secondary schools won't promote apprenticeships to young people. They promote university because that's seen as a positive outcome. If your local secondary school can say 80% of our A-level students went to a good university, that's a much bigger, impactful thing for them to announce than 80% of our students went on to apprenticeships in their minds, and we need to change that.
Definitely. Thank you for that. Lou, I know you come on a camera. Did you want to?
No, I'm really just listening with interest. I know obviously at Crimson we've had some great success with our apprenticeships cohorts over the last few years actually, and we hired 2 lots over the pandemic, which was brilliant. I know there's been certain challenges with retention on and off, but on the whole I think we've been quite fortunate. But I think on that point around university via apprenticeships, I went to university, it was okay, I had a great time, didn't particularly don't think it particularly supported my academic career going forward, but it gave me life skills. But I really do see both my own son and also friends of mine who just weren't given the encouragement of apprenticeships early on, and it sounds like it's still happening, and it's just tragic because there's so much in someone at 18 years old being able to get this opportunity. And I think there's just lots more that needs to be done with schools, most definitely. I've just volunteered to go into my son's high school and actually do some breakfast forums, like I said, and they can't kick it off because of COVID, but they're going to be hopefully soon. But that for me is at least a stepping stone in the right direction, just reaching out to who they can. But it just seems that we're still a million miles away, really. And I think this whole university is the way for, it's a shame that that's still the message that's been driven through, really.
And hopefully that will start to change. But I know, Julie, you've got your hand up. I saw you're in the chat. We'll have the last question, then we'll move on to our next speaker. So Julie, did you want to?
Yeah, can I just point out, it's not just an aspiration. These schools actually have a blasted target to get them to university or college, which is why they don't promote the apprenticeship. And it's why I work with 2 of the special needs schools rather than the others, because the reality is the youngsters that go to the 2 schools that I now support, in most cases, never going to make university. But they struggle with the fact they have a target to get these youngsters to university. It's a policy issue as much as it is an education issue. It frustrates me to death because I'll be honest, half these youngsters in my 2 special needs schools are generally at the top end of the spectrum. And actually they'd make brilliant coders, but nobody's given them the confidence to believe that. And that any other route of training other than going to university, which for some of these is just never going to happen. It's an ingrained policy issue as much as a behavioural issue in schools. So I feel for the schools and the teachers, because unfortunately they're measured on it. And I think that's part of why we're not giving the right education to too many of our youngsters now.
Yeah, that's really interesting and super frustrating because, like you said, there's people with so much potential, youngsters, but actually not being advised correctly. Therefore, they feel that maybe they can't do this, they can't do that, but they're not knowing the possibilities because nobody's educating them about it.
Yeah, and nobody's believing in them either. And I think that's probably the bit that I've learned most is these children just need someone to believe in them. I mentor a young lady who is currently living in care, who's had a miserable life. But you know what? She wants to become a lawyer, but everybody in her life has told her she will not make it. And that's just crazy, absolutely crazy. And so I'm mentoring her to get her some self-belief. I've even managed to get her into a friend of mine who's a lawyer, who said she's got the intelligence, she just doesn't have the right qualification at the moment because her schooling has never been aligned to it. So I think, you know, the more of us that can get in there into those schools and start making contact and making life real for them, I think, you know, it is terribly important. I've even drugged my husband in. He's 30 years in the military. He's going in to talk to the youngsters, and it turns out the feedback so far is that they're really looking forward to him coming in and talking about going into the Navy because they want someone to tell them how real it is.
Mm.
No, that's amazing. Thank you for that. That's, yeah, definitely insightful as well. It's not just that they're not wanting to do it, it's that they're being targeted. So that's something that needs to be looked at as well. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for your questions. Thank you, Kerry, for your great speech as well and your presentation. And do get in contact with Kerry if you've got any questions regarding apprentices, because even that was insightful for me. So I'm sure everyone else it was insightful for as well. And just the whole topic of apprentices and what we can do to get more people into apprentices and do more with them and retain them, as Kerry said, is really important as well. So thank you so much, Kerry. And I'm sure you'll be in the chat, won't you, as well, if anyone's got any other questions.
I will. Thank you.
Perfect. Thank you. So now we'll hand over to Nicola. So if you're okay to share your screens, and thank you. Really excited for your talk.
Thank you very much. So hello, everyone. My name's Nicola. I did used to be
Hello.
BT's futurologist at one point, which is a ridiculous job title, admittedly. So I am slightly more boringly known as a principal innovation partner with BT. So yeah, I'm part of BT's innovation team. I am based, I'm sure some of you know it, at the lovely Adastral Park, which is just outside Ipswich. I'm of course not there today. I'm actually standing in my lounge, as I have been for the past 2 years. I have been up to Adastral a few times, but like most of you, I have been working from home, and it's been an interesting time because I've studied working from home since the early 90s. I joined BT obviously at the age of 6, and in the early 90s I was part of the big Inverness experiment that we ran, which was a proper experiment about home working. And I'm a psychologist, so I was part of the psychological monitoring team for that. So that's been interesting. That actually I dug out just before the pandemic actually a lot of the research documents about that, and what everyone was saying right at the beginning of the session kind of echoed a lot of the things that were being said back in the 90s. The difference, of course, from the 90s and now is that we had to bulldoze people's front gardens in order to get a big enough pipe to get them working from their homes at that time, because we didn't have, I call them the holy trinity, connectivity, collaboration tools, and cloud. We didn't have any of that, so we had to kind of dig up things. As a result, that was quite expensive in the 90s. And although BT actually was a big proponent of home working during the 2000s, we did kind of pull back a tiny bit. So it's been really interesting just to chart a lot of the things that are going on the future of work. So I've been running a research project around the future of work for probably about 12 years now, way before the pandemic, because we were speculating and we could see that work was changing anyway. So it's really been a case of that the past 2 years have been a particularly fascinating experiment, I suppose. Kind of not really, but in really figuring out how work might work into the future. So what I'm going to do over the next 30 minutes is take you on a bit of a journey from automation through to Zedonks. I will explain, don't worry, and explore where we think the future world of work might go, given the learning that we've had from the pandemic. So just a wee bit more. I think I'm contractually obliged to show this slide because I'm sure most of you are very aware of BT's research and innovation, but a lot of people are not, frankly, and we're not very good at talking about it. So I'm part of a very big innovation ecosystem. We love pretentious words that spans not just Adastral Park, but the globe. I get to work with some incredibly clever and wonderful people, particularly in places like MIT. You'll see some of their work, Cambridge University, London Business School, London School of Economics. There's a whole mix of stuff going on, and my job, I guess, in the team that I'm in is I call it speed dating. So I'm in the enterprise division in BT. So my customers are primarily large UK corporates and public sector. So my job is to kind of speed date my customers with a lot of the innovation that's going on within BT and indeed with our innovation ecosystem partners. And as I mentioned, I am a slightly weird part of the team because I am the psychologist in the team. And I always say, you know, that justifying having a psychologist in an innovation team is really, really logical because, well, people have to use the technology. If they don't use the technology, there probably isn't a lot of innovation going on. So I keep saying that people are the most disruptive part of innovation rather than the technology. So I work very closely with a lot of very incredible technologists, but my big question is, well, what does this mean for us? And case in point, you know, for the past 5 years, we've probably had that holy trinity of architecture underpinning the future world of work. So that cloud connectivity and collaboration tools, they've been in place for about 5 years. They weren't in the 90s. And yet, although we could see those cogs changing in terms of the future world of work, it was very slow. And what we've effectively seen during the pandemic is like everything, it's just really kind of driven a bullet train through strategy. And I think as we emerge, blinking, well, into a possibly at some point endemic situation, it's interesting to try and speculate whether all of the stuff that we've done is going to stick. Now, it's an interesting time at the moment, certainly for someone doing research in this area, because there's loads of announcements in the press. There's lots of discussion going on around, well, what are we going to be doing? How many days are we going to be in the office? Do we need offices at all? All of that is a really interesting conversation. But I think from the perspective of the future world of work, the one dominant word is hybrid, and it's already been mentioned a couple of times this morning. I think one of the problems with that is there are so many words being bandied around. We've got agile working, smart working, flexible working, and hybrid is just another word. What on earth does it mean, though? And I think I get slightly frustrated when a lot of the discussions that I have with organizations tend to be about, well, how many days should I be in the office? And although that's a laudable conversation, I don't think it's the right conversation. And the analogy I tend to use is the Zedonk, which is my favourite hybrid. Google it. They're very cute, Zedonks. They're half zebra, they're half donkey. They look a little bit like a donkey with zebra socks. But they don't they don't have an existential crisis every morning going, am I a zebra or am I a donkey this morning? Because they are a different breed. And I don't think we should be having an existential crisis every morning going, should I be in the office or should I be at home? Because the question we need to ask is, well, what work am I doing? This should be all about the work, and it should be about redefining work for a hybrid and digital age. And that was starting to happen before the pandemic as well. So what do I mean by hybrid? Well, I mean, the pure definition of hybrid is you untether yourself from both time and place, potentially. And you are left with the work. But to be honest, when you look at the press, there seem to be, I mean, it's already been mentioned this morning, there are the two extremes. There's everyone back to the office on one side, a lot of the banks, to be honest, particularly the big investment banks, that's what they're doing. On the other side, we've got the fully remote organizations, the sort of, a lot of them are startups, a lot of them are IT companies, you know, you've got the Slacks of the world, they work remotely permanently. Don't worry about offices. And then I think in between, we've got these flavors of hybrid. And it depends on how much strategic importance the office has in that strategy. So I've kind of put two categories in. There's the office first hybrid, where the office is very important. And then there's the remote first hybrid, where it's less important. And to be honest, interestingly, BT was a remote first hybrid. We are now an office first hybrid because we've just invested in some fabulous offices. And I was in one actually this week. They're much different to the old BT offices, which I always used to be able to walk down a high street and go, that's a BT office. It was usually the one with no windows. Now, I keep saying BT offices generally were built for technology, not people, the old ones. So why would you want windows? So case in point, I was in Birmingham this week. Our previous Birmingham office was a classic concrete, no windows. We now have a building that basically is all windows. So much better environment for humans to inhabit. And yet, obviously, the pandemic has challenged us in terms of whether we do inhabit those places or not. So I seem to have lost my screen, but I will try and reshare. So yeah, I mean, that I think the real focus of the debate really needs to be around whether, hang on, it's redefining the actual work that we are doing rather than necessarily where we're doing it or when we're doing it. And that is a big challenge, but I think that is a great challenge to have, and that's why it's an exciting time to work in this area. So I think, you know, everyone is talking about hybrid. That it's unclear. I mean, a lot of people have backtracked on some of their announcements around going back to the office. Notably Apple and people like that have decided it's not a good idea with Omicron around. I think I've been using the time to kind of delve a little bit more deeply into this hybrid model. Now, hybrid is not an easy model. It has been around for many, many years. A lot of you probably have been working in a hybrid model for a while. But when you look at putting it into a very big organization, there are a lot of, I call them hybrid headaches, or horrible hybrids that start to develop. And actually, from a psychological perspective, the big one, I think, is proximity bias. Now, proximity bias is something we have somewhat of a primitive brain. So, you know, we are tribal. Our brains tend to work on, if I see people, if I recognize people, if I know people on a very regular basis, I trust them. The trouble is, when you get two tribes, your remote tribe, your office tribe, they do, as Frankie Goes to Hollywood says, go to war. And it's not intentional, it's unintentional bias here. Now, the best illustration of this is one that we're all very familiar with, which I am sure you've all experienced over the past few months, which is the hybrid meeting. This is something that we are really looking at putting some innovation in at the moment, because hybrid meetings are largely a bit of a nightmare. And the problem often is proximity bias. So if you've got half the people in the room, half the people in digital space, the people in the room tend to forget about the people in digital space. And actually, I was in one meeting, there was a classic example of this, that the people in digital space couldn't even really see the people in the room because the camera was at the end of the room. It was mounted on a whiteboard. So basically, and when it got shrunk into that little postage stamp, we couldn't even see who was in the room, no body language. Then, of course, because it was mounted on a whiteboard, the presenter was standing by the whiteboard. So we could not see the presenter, or in fact, the whiteboard. So there was a lot of problems and what happened was, although we in digital space told them, they forgot about us quite rapidly. They adjusted for about 5 minutes. And then you ended up with two meetings going on. One that was in the room and one that was primarily on chat in the digital space. And of course, the people in the room were not on the chat session. So it was two meetings. Not great. So a lot of the stuff that we're doing at the moment, we've learned that if everyone is remote, it kind of works. We've got our little celebrity squares. We've all got a bit frustrated about that. Maybe more on that in a minute. But actually, it works. The problem is hybrid. You can't guarantee. Well, certainly one of my customers said that they've got this motto that it's all Zoom or all room. Obviously, other platforms are available, but if you do have a hybrid meeting, just jump on whatever you've got, to Zoom, Teams, WebEx, and turn your camera on. But of course, that's weird, because why would you be in the office to do that? So I think we've got a lot to sort out, and we're looking at all sorts of solutions around how do we make that a lot better in terms of the experience from the digital side, but also making sure that the people in the room don't ignore people. That, of course, goes out into all sorts of other things. So out of sight, out of mind management. We do know from research before the pandemic that that people that weren't regularly in the office in many organizations and weren't seen by their managers got passed over for a promotion, didn't get that bonus. So again, we need to make sure that that unconscious bias doesn't happen in a hybrid situation. And actually, ultimately, what we need to do is to make all work visible. So not just the work that's in the four walls of the office, we need to make it all visible. And that implies a certain amount of asynchronicity. So there's a time component in hybrid that's not discussed as much as the space part. So how do we make it asynchronous? Do we make it a lot more written so that everybody can see what's going on? And actually, time, I think, is a really interesting challenge for hybrid as well. I have an anxiety around this, what I call the two-speed organization, mainly because, again, the two tribes, the remote tribe versus the office tribe, tend to work in very different time patterns. So if you're in an office, you're working probably the traditional Dolly Parton 9 to 5. You work in a block of time. If you're working from home, as you all know, it's more like time confetti. So you probably work longer hours, but you do other stuff. You take your dog for a walk, you do some household chores, you pick the kids up from school. You're able to do that. But you've got to try and mesh at some point those two very different work patterns together. Then, of course, if you give people free rein as to what days they are going to be in the office, typically they're going to choose a Tuesday, a Wednesday, and a Thursday, which obviously abbreviates to something rude, but I won't go there. Thursday apparently is the day at the moment. But the trouble then, of course, is that you have expensive office real estate completely empty on a Monday and completely empty on a Friday. So again, how do you start to balance this out? So there's a lot of coordination that's required in a hybrid model. Then I could spend hours on leadership. I won't, but working with the likes of Linda Grattan, for example, at London Business School, who's been doing a lot around hybrid leadership. I think certainly doing a lot of interviews with leaders, and we've just done some stuff with contact centres actually recently, and interviewing the leaders there. It's really challenged the ways that they normally work. So contact centre managers especially lead by walking around. They do sit by coaching. They do sit by mentoring. How do you do that in a model where you can't sit by people or walk around? So it's really challenged them. And actually, the interviews we did do, we've done 2 sets of interviews now, a year apart. There was a big anxiety amongst management around, I don't know if I can do this initially in the pandemic, but now they've adjusted, but they've adjusted to largely a fully remote model. The anxiety now is, I'm not sure how I'm going to do this when we've got people split in time and space. So again, we need to probably invest a bit of training and reassurance for leaders to do that. Interestingly enough, senior leaders were the first to go back to the office. Now, I'm still trying to get under this, but again, I think particularly for senior leaders, it's kind of by its nature, leadership at that level is very social. It's all the Instagram photos of us I'm with my team, I'm shaking hands, I'm talking to people. Again, you can do that in a remote environment, but you've got to work a lot harder. So I think, senior leadership especially has got an interesting learning curve to go. Now, I think they have learned a lot, and certainly I think trust has come out pretty well in the pandemic, trusting people to work not in an office. We've seen a lot more empathetic leadership, and primarily that's also been that leaders have seen people outside their office kind of persona. So we have met their dogs and cats and children and partners, and we've seen their wallpaper and, admired their bookcases. And so we've seen them maybe in a slightly more multifaceted way than we would necessarily if we just saw them in the office. So I think empathetic leadership is an interesting one. But I think also leaders need to be great at, we were talking about this earlier, at explaining purpose, storytelling, engaging people, taking them along in the journey. I think the skill that everybody needs, especially leaders into the future, is this networking skill. I mean, there's good and bad news on this one. Most of us, to be honest, are not very good networkers. I'm terrible, by the way. I think we need to be better at networking, both physical and digital space. Now, it is a skill. The good thing is it is a skill. So you can start to teach networking. So I know at one point I don't know if it actually happened, but we were discussing putting into the BT apprenticeship program a module around how do you network. Because frankly, we need our leaders to network better, but we also probably need our employees to do that. So I think networking is a really key skill for the future. Then, I mean, nobody really knows what's going to happen. So I think a lot of the companies I'm working with at the moment have taken a very refreshing perspective on this and going, we don't have all the answers. We are learning as we go. We're not going to get everything right. So that experimental mindset, I think, is absolutely right to get get over some of these horrible hybrids, rather than going, oh, well, it's not working, let's bring everyone back to the office. And the reason we shouldn't be doing that is really around the crux. I mean, I think one of the big things that we have learned during the pandemic is that hybrid working, remote working is a very, very inclusive way of working. So for diversity and inclusion, hybrid is brilliant. There are lots of things I could talk about this. I mean, to be honest, certainly with women in mind, women have generally not had a great pandemic, partially fueling the great resignation during the pandemic for women was homeschooling. The fact that they bore the biggest burden when when the children were at home, and unless their employer was willing to give them a certain amount of flexibility, they had no choice but to quit. But I think, you know, any carers, I think, value flexibility very highly. So that ability to choose, and I think it's more about flexibility potentially than hybrid at this point. But I'm doing quite a lot with our Able to network and also AbilityNet around disabilities and neurodiversity mentioned earlier as well. Interestingly, I have a couple of very good friends in wheelchairs, and they've had kind of a great pandemic, because they've been included in everything. They've been going to conferences, they've been going to meetings. And I think their anxiety is that as we go into a more sort of world where people are then being required to go to a physical space, yes, they can do it, but it's a lot more effort for them. So they're saying, maintain the ability for me to come in remotely and interact. Similarly, on the neurodiversity spectrum, talking to a couple of people on the autism spectrum, they were saying that if they commute, the commute almost kills them. So before they've even got to the office, they want to go home. Then they get to the office and it's bright and it's open plan and it's noisy and they can't cope. And actually, they work much more productively from home. So the message here is, if we can give people more choices, we can get them much more productive. And I think that's the thing that we really offer in a hybrid model. So what's the role of the office then? Well, frankly, this has been changing before the pandemic. I think we realised that work didn't necessarily go on in the office. It could go on anywhere. But again, the pandemic just accelerated the thinking. So frankly, the one thing we've missed about the office is the social bits. So that's what offices are for. Socialising about work. So communicating, collaborating, building community. All of those are primary functions of the office. The trouble is, the conventional open plan office is not built for that. It's built for capacity. How many desks can I get in? How many people can I get into this space? That ignores the fact that actually spaces are changing. And to be honest, there are some amazing office spaces emerging, and I've become a bit of a geek. I've been collecting them, just looking around and seeing all of these really interesting spaces that aren't all about desks and utilization, but more about who's in the office, what are they doing, and how do we actually flex the environment to support what they need. Now, home working has been a roaring success largely. Now, I have to proviso this. Most people in the workforce can't homework because they need to be physically co-located. So retail workers, factory workers will struggle to work from home. Obviously, IT professionals, knowledge workers have had the fortune for doing it, to do it. Now, it's not the norm. The experiment we ran in the 90s, people volunteered to work from home. We haven't volunteered here. We've been forced to do it. So it's been a slightly abnormal situation. But the data seems to be broadly 70% of people who were lucky enough to be able to do it, it works for them. They don't necessarily want to do it all the time, but it works for them. 30% of people, it really, really doesn't work. And that tends to skew younger. So younger people typically often are in shared houses. So they're competing for space and they're competing for bandwidth. And also, they don't necessarily have the well-developed networks that us oldies have either. So they are missing that socialization process. So again, we do need to incorporate them into the workspace as well. And they might have very different needs to someone like me who's just dipping in to meet people to catch up on the gossip. So this is the dynamism of the office. Now, there's also the third space. I used to call it the coffice, which was my preferred workspace. So I only need coffee to work, basically. But the sort of co-working spaces that have been springing up all over the place, I think also support the other trend that we've been looking at around climate change. So the fact that we should probably not do a 2-hour commute into an urban office unless there is a really good reason to do it. But I want to get out of the house and I want a nice place to work. So using, as the French call it, la vie de quart d'heure, the 15-minute city principle, can I have a walk or a bike ride and get to a place where I can meet people and have a great cup of coffee? So I think, we're getting that mixture. And I think again, the beauty of hybrid is actually it's not the place that's the default. It's digital that's the default. You make the digital workplace work and actually place becomes a slightly less relevant. And obviously you will have a mixture of all these things typically in a day-to-day interaction. So we need to incorporate that, but we also need to incorporate people who don't work in offices. And I think that, again, this hasn't been discussed as much. How do we offer them hybrid as well? So they might not be able to work from home. We might be able to give them flexible working. I know actually Skanska at the moment are now offering some of their construction workers the ability to job share or choose their hours or shift barter. And I think the idea there is to get more women in the workforce, because again, construction tends to be very male dominated. A lot of the stuff here, we're starting to dip into the very trendy topic of the metaverse, which obviously got a lot of press coverage a couple of months ago. I think I was on the BBC a couple of times talking about what on earth is it. I'm not going to go full Matrix here because I think that's very distant future, but if we wanted at all, but really starting to use tools like virtual reality, mixed reality, and indeed volumetric video holograms to start to enhance collaboration, maybe outside the bubble of the office. So great example here using augmented reality with a paramedic. So using 5G in the Midlands at the moment, we have our paramedic with his augmented reality headset on and a haptic glove, using 5G to transmit high definition voice, video, voice and touch, and all of the instrumentation back to a remote clinician in the hospital. That means that the paramedic can do a lot more procedures supervised rather than they would be if they were unsupervised. So again, you know, just extending out that bubble of collaboration. We've got all sorts of things going on in Belfast, for example, crane inspectors. Again, he's climbing a crane, so we've got an augmented reality headset. He can bring in a second opinion. We're putting a drone into it as well, so he doesn't have to do quite so much climbing. So there's a lot that we're doing really with things like augmented reality. We're starting to question whether some jobs that usually need to be co-located might not be, so surgery being one of the main ones, but the guy in the blue there, that's not one that we're doing, but that's a miner working from home using again 5G to drive remote mining equipment. If you saw the EE advert recently, it wasn't faked. We did put Tom Ellis at the top of Snowdon and shaved him using a robot arm. It was practiced, let's put it that way, but it wasn't faked. Hairdressing, could we be doing that remotely with a robot arm? I'm not sure about that one. In Scotland, we've been doing some stuff with what we call the immersive classroom. So rather than having headsets, which is not great, and you need the hardware, can we actually turn an entire room into a 360-degree interactive space? So for education, we've initially been looking at that to engage kids into a much more interactive environment. We're looking at potentially could we use that for meeting rooms in the workspace as well. And then, of course, appealing to my Star Wars geek, we are looking at holograms as well. Something, as I said, called volumetric video. Not quite avatars, which have been talked about a lot recently, because if you saw ABBA, they were in lycra and wearing dots. If you want to wear lycra and wear dots, you can, but actually we just use multiple cameras to capture a 360-degree view of yourself, which we could then project into any environment. So really early days on that one. It's a bit clunky, but then so was video back in the day. So I always say, watch this space. I want to stand in front of my team and say, help me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope, as a hologram at some point. I'm sure I will. Just briefly, I think one of the things we've been looking at is simply how the dynamic of collaboration has changed during the pandemic. And actually within teams, we've seen a lot more collaboration and communication. So more email, more mail, messages, and of course, more meetings. I do tend to get up every morning with an impending sense of Zoom, which is not good. So we've all been on those death by meeting days, and that's not a problem with video conferencing. It's not a problem with the technology. It's a problem with meetings, to be honest. And I mentioned earlier that we're a bit stuck on synchrony. Should this be a synchronous meeting? I think is a big question we need to ask ourselves. Could we do a lot more asynchronously rather than continuously having back-to-back meetings? So I think we've kind of lifted and shifted that analog concept of a meeting into the digital world without necessarily thinking of the consequences. And actually, I was talking to a professional services company, and they'd measured that on average their employees were spending 7 seconds between meetings. So that's not healthy. Microsoft even saw the effect on the brain. Basically, the brain melts by mid-afternoon at that point if you've been having a death by meeting day. So it's not a productive way of working. We need to rethink that. So that's within teams. Outside teams, we've seen a big degradation of networking. And partially that's tied into serendipity, but I get very cross when people go, well, serendipity can only happen in an office. I don't think it can. I think you can do digital serendipity. It's just not quite as spontaneous because you have to kind of plan it. And there are lots of technologies out there that maybe might help. I actually encountered one that was a bit like Tinder for the workplace the other day, where it matches you with people with similar interests and suggests you go for a virtual coffee. Now, I have to say I'm an introvert. Every fibre of my being hates that idea. So I'm not sure it's going to work. Certainly for people like me, I feel a little bit uncomfortable. It's a good intention. I think we probably just need to think about how that network maybe works and how introverts might want to engage with this. Bear in mind, I'm also a bad networker. The final one I want to talk about as hybrid, I think is again one that we've all struggled with. I call it the death of Dolly. This is, of course, Dolly Parton again. I'm a huge Dolly fan, by the way, and she's definitely not dead. But I think there's a lot of discussion around this concept. 9 to 5, Monday to Friday. Is that an antiquated way of working? A lot of the ideas around work were basically derived in the Industrial Revolution, and we've had a lot of time since then. So, I mean, there's a lot of discussion around 4-day weeks at the moment. I think potentially we know longer hours actually mean you're often less productive. So 4-day weeks do seem to work. 9 to 5, well, we tend to work beyond that because one of the big problems that we certainly found from mass home working is that we don't have an off switch anymore. We some of us feel that we're living at work. So as Kevin Kelly quite rightly says, the problem of the future is not connection, it's disconnection. And that's all about re-establishing boundaries. Now, we've been doing a lot of work actually for quite a number of years on this one because we recognised it was a problem. Some of the stuff here is from Lancaster University. We've also done quite a lot with Cambridge, looking at this concept of techno stress. So, our technology encourages us to multitask. Multitasking is a terrible way of working. It's very unproductive, and actually for complex tasks can be, horribly destructive in terms of productivity. So we probably need to learn to single task a little bit better again, particularly for those complex things. Then, of course, technology is moving pretty fast, and we might assume that everyone can pick it up and use it, but actually that's not necessarily the case. The big one, it certainly is around this always on mentality. And we've done quite a lot with Cambridge on this one. We actually did a diet with them. We couldn't call it the Cambridge diet because someone got there before us. But like any good diet, it's a 5-step plan for individuals who are feeling stressed by being always on. How can you turn off? So I always say that generally the culprits are the M&Ms. Meetings, messages, and managers. Those are the 3 things that tend to stress people. And you can do things to prevent necessarily people getting very stressed about all of those things if you are aware that they are a problem in the first place. And if you do want a copy of that, I'm very happy to share it. And then, of course, there might be some insecurity around, well, if my boss doesn't see me, how do I demonstrate that I am busy? And again, that might actually start to provoke some very bad behaviours and actually ultimately leads to burnout rather than productivity. So there are a ton of things that we need to address in terms of this hybrid working world. I can spend hours talking about this, as you can probably gather, and there's a lot of research under it. So if you are having trouble sleeping, I can probably help. So we've got everything from the paper that this particular presentation is based on, from automation to Zedonks. We've got hints and tips for working from home, which I'm sure you've figured out by now, but we've been looking at sort of how collaboration does work. And as I said, the Balanced Communication Diet for Business is also published as well. So I'm going to shut up. I've talked way too long. I think we've got a little bit of time left if anyone does have any questions or comments. So thank you very much for listening.
Thank you for that, Nicola. That was amazing and so insightful. So thank you. I'm echoing a bit. I hope everyone can't hear me echo. But yeah, there's been loads of comments come through. So thank you for everyone who's been interacting in the chat. So one of the comments that we got was visibility of work is tough when you are in a relationship building role. That was from you, Laura, wasn't it? Have you got any tips or from your findings that you could share, Nicola, with just what you found or what could help with visibility? I know we've got this, but when you're in a relationship building role, Laura, is that what you've struggled with in terms of building relationships or building that trust as you talked around, Nicola, earlier?
Yeah, more because you spend a lot of time trying to build a relationship with customers, and the transparency around that, and monitoring what people are doing is really tough. And you actually only really find out when those are really working when things go wrong, in my experience.
Yeah, I mean, we did some interviews with sales teams actually, sort of mid first year of the pandemic, because again, they obviously they are relationship builders, and there was a lot of anxiety around, well, if I don't see my customer on a regular basis and go for a coffee with them, how do I build a relationship? And actually, a lot of the advice that we gave them was, we'll just drop them a line occasionally, sort of say, can I have a virtual coffee? And I think a lot of the sales teams, they went from a really anxious state going, we're not going to sell anything, to actually they've been pretty successful. So I think, again, building relationships does require work in a digital environment. It's got to be intentional. You can't just bump into people. You can't just grab a coffee. It's got to be intentional. And I think that's hard. So it is a muscle we need to kind of train. But I think you can, as I said, I think you can build relationships digitally.
I love that philosophy you were talking about, digital serendipity. Actually, I'll think through that in terms of the whole relationship building piece. You have got to work a lot harder, haven't you? It's really good advice.
Absolutely. And as I said, there's a lot of technologies that are trying to build serendipity into the digital space. As I said, some of them are not quite, I don't think they're going to work that well, but I think it's good that people are looking into that area and trying to understand how connections and relationships are brokered. And actually, a lot of it is, I call those good networkers perfect party hosts. And if you are a great party host, you typically know who's at the party. You know a little bit about all of them, and then what you're really good at doing is introducing people. And I think those people are the key often to that networking. So people actually acting as a broker. Me as an introvert, I'm a lot more comfortable if somebody I know introduces me to somebody I don't know.
Yeah.
So I think that might potentially be a better way of doing it around sort of building those connections. But we are reliant on those great party hosts.
Yeah, that's really interesting actually, because when I organise events with my friends, I always think about the things that they'd enjoy doing, and I don't apply that to my digital marketing so much. So that's a really, really good advice. I'll think about that.
Good.
We've had some great comments. So Sarah Dennett, you've talked around dress code, haven't you, as well, within your contract? So are people, you finding everyone's a bit more relaxed now, and the lead, some of the directors are more casual as well, like leading by example with what they're wearing?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it was interesting because the first time I went on site to my contractor, I felt compelled to go looking in probably a traditional corporate outfit, only to find everybody was there in their trainers, jeans, and polo shirts, and anything else that they could grab. So I was dressed slightly more relaxed the next time that I went in. So, and it would just be interesting to see the extent to which that's carried through. I've noticed that my husband as well, his organisation, and that's in financial services, where you would traditionally expect them to be a little more formal. They're again dressing down, whereas it used to be a dress down Friday, didn't it? And now it was yeah. So it's interesting, but then I think that's probably a good thing, evolving, particularly for the new generation coming through, which ties back into the previous conversations when we were talking about our young people entering into the jobs market. And yeah, I think it's, for me, I think it's good to see. I do still quite like to be dressed up there every now and again. It is so it's just the balance, really, isn't it? Whatever you feel comfortable in.
Yeah, I think that's definitely changed, isn't it? Like, and that's why I think some people are confused now what to wear. because they don't want to be too dressed up, because then are they going to look out of place? But then, yeah, I think we're all finding that as what do we actually wear to meetings, to kind of clients. I'm sure others can relate to that as well. So we've got 3 Sarahs, I think, with us today. So amazing. So Sarah, sorry if I say your name, Capets. I hope I haven't butchered your name. So you said your employer brought in extra holidays where you're all given extra time off at the same time.
Yeah,
Was that like
hi guys. Yeah, I'm another ex-BT person, so I think work with
hello?
Nick. Yeah, so I work for Logitech, and they basically brought in Logi long weekends, so where the whole company were given an extra 1 day off a month, okay, to have a long weekend. So we had a Logi long weekend. Sorry, a Logi day off on a Monday. Then they've cut that down for this year and called it Logi long weekends, and you actually get a Thursday and Friday off, but everyone is off. Okay, unless you choose not to be, so that you're not, so you do disconnect. You don't think, oh, I've got to do this, I've got to do that. And they're really, really trying to help you disconnect. As much as we are the most connected business you ever want to do, we've got more collaboration tools than anything, whiteboard stuff, video, everyone is on video, but they want you to disconnect and separate your work and your life, and have a passion for what you do. And that's really important. They want you to find your passion, and that's why our director is like, you must disconnect. Doing it is harder than saying it, though. Let's be honest. I think the French working time directive has definitely got a way forward with stopping emails, hasn't it? So yeah, it's a great culture.
Yeah, that's really good, and especially for mental health and
Yeah.
retention, and making sure that everyone's happy and not burnt out. I think that's amazing.
But I think one of the other things that I've learned is also, you talked about dress code, is also the standing desk. Okay, because most people, like, Nicola's famous for her waistcoat. So how would you know on that call? You would not know that, okay, without having a standing desk. So I think when you go into a meeting, you see the culture of an organisation from the moment you step into reception. You can see, are they casual? Are they smart? What the vibe is. Do they have coffee machines? Do they have pool rooms? You don't get that. You don't see who your customer supports. You can't say, they support Spurs. You see the calendar. You don't get that. And some people are uncomfortable because they've got people running around in the background. So it's trying to understand the culture and interact with people in a way. And that, I think, is the hardest thing, no matter what the technology, just from a social point of view. How are you and what have you been up to? And that's part of the conversation that you would get from meeting someone and shaking their hand and going into the meeting room. So there you go.
Yeah,
That's just my
no, definitely. No, thank you for that. And I'm just conscious of time, because I know everyone's got as we talked about, other meetings to go to in, probably 7 seconds, as Nicola said, or a few minutes. So I just want to ensure that we finish on time. But thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. And thank you for our speakers, Kerry and Nicola. You're both amazing. And thank you, everyone, for interacting and making our sessions what they are. Do connect with everyone on LinkedIn. Kerry and Nicola, reach out to me if you've got any questions as well around the future of work, around apprenticeships. Both really interesting topics and talks. So thank you so much for taking your time to do that for the community, for the women in tech community. I really appreciate it. And just seeing Kerry, but we need some in-person events so that we can dust off our lovely shoes and outfits, so we can all practice how to dress again. Yeah, and Claire, I'm sure you'll have a bunch of shoes ready, won't you, for that? So yeah, thank you, everyone. And again, thank you to our speakers, and thank you to everyone that's got involved in the chat. It makes the community what it is. So see you soon. Thank you.
That was great. Thank you ever
Yeah,
so much.
bye all. Thank
Brilliant.
you.
Have a
Thank
good
you.
day.
Speak
Bye bye.
soon. You too.
See you next time, guys. Thank you.
Bye.